We have spoken about domestic violence on this channel so much now that it really is nothing new. But when a man has been sent to jail twice for his actions with hardly any time, and then was charged with a third case of domestic violence, when will enough be enough? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to my channel and Killer Concepts, the place where we talk about all things true crime. My name is Peyton. Before we get started, please make sure to hit that red subscribe button down below and turn on your post notifications so you do not miss any future content. Trigger warning, as today we are talking about domestic violence. Surprise, surprise. One in which a man named Christopher Pelkey had previously been sentenced twice for other domestic violence offenses on two other women, and then in 2022 he was charged for offenses on another woman. If you have been watching my channel for a while now, then you know how passionate I am when I'm talking about domestic violence. It's honestly just something that needs to be focused on more and isn't. While I try and be as unbiased as possible and keep my opinion out of most of my videos, this is not going to be one of them. To me, there is just never an excuse for doing things that we will be talking about today. I am looking forward to the day when our justice system will eventually get things right and have these offenders serve the proper amount of time for their crimes. These are crimes and should be treated as such, not as tiny misdemeanor offenses, but we will get to that in a minute. Honestly, I can't remember how I came by this particular case or actually cases, but when I did, I knew I needed to speak about it. I do want to note that it seems all or almost all of the information on this case is either from NBC or its affiliates. I have all the links down below like I usually do. I surprisingly couldn't really find anyone else reporting on it. With all of that being said, let's get into it. Christopher Pelkey is a 35-year-old man, or that was his age at the time of all of the reports that I read, from Maine with a history of domestic violence. In 2022, he pleaded guilty to a third case of domestic violence, including one count of aggravated assault and one count of domestic violence criminal threatening. These are both felonies. This was for assaulting Andrea Stevens. This is the most recent case that we'll talk about last. To NBC News, Pelkey, who pleaded guilty to only misdemeanors in the previous cases with only a little over a month in jail, has also been charged with two other domestic violence felonies in the 2022 assault. His sentence for the 2022 crime is a suspended term of 4 years and 3 years of probation. The two women involved in Pelkey's previous cases were Ashley Alaimo and Persis Smith, both of which were terrifying domestic violence situations, and he barely got any time. All three women involved with Pelkey who have experienced domestic violence all have developed a relationship quickly with him, and of course, at first there was no signs of his abusive behavior. We are going to talk about what happened to Alaimo and Persis, and then we will talk about Stevens, who is the most recent case. Ashley Alaimo, 37, who was a Navy veteran, met Christopher Pelkey at a Veterans of Foreign Wars post. Alaimo immediately felt like she had a very strong connection with him, and they seemed to move pretty quickly in their relationship. In a sworn statement to the police department located in Orono, where the couple lived in 2015, she said, quote, "We fell in love so quickly and there was no fear in my heart about being with him," end quote. However, only a few months into the relationship, things would start to take a turn. Pelkey would become violent with Alaimo. There was a time when she would try and leave her apartment, but he would grab her and drag her down the hallway. She would try so hard to get away from him that she would actually grab onto the wall, like at the beginning of the hallway, leaving claw marks. Police would be called a week later when things would only get worse. On September 13th, 2015, Pelkey would leave during an argument, and when he would leave, Alaimo would deadbolt the door behind him. When he got back and she wouldn't open the door for him, he would then use the fire escape to get up to the apartment and break the window to enter that way. Alaimo told police that when he entered, he would knock her to the ground and pressed on her throat so hard that she couldn't breathe. He would then grab a shard of glass from the broken window and threaten to kill her. NBC reports that she would then try and escape through a bathroom window, but she would fail after trying multiple times, and he would only continue to choke her, covering her nose and mouth. Pelkey would eventually let go enough that Alaimo was able to scream loud enough for other people to hear, and Pelkey would flee. When he would run, she would call 911. Police would arrive at the home, and Pelkey would show up after, telling the police that he blocked her from leaving because she had been drinking, but his timeline it didn't really add up. While the police were at the apartment, they confirmed that there was claw marks on the wall from the incident the previous week. Pelkey would be arrested by the police and would be charged with aggravated assault and domestic violence threatening with a dangerous weapon, filed by the Bangor District Court. It would be 2 years later that Pelkey would plead guilty, but not to the felony charges. He would plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor charges. Misdemeanors. They were lowered to misdemeanors. Pelkey was sentenced to 10 months in jail with 1 year of probation, but he would only serve 30 days in jail. And just let that sink in for a second. Only 30 days in jail, but just wait, because his crimes only get worse and the time he serves isn't any better. So unfortunately, since he only had to serve 30 days in jail, he was now free to assault other women. And the next one would get as far as to marry the dangerous man. Persis Smith, 36, would meet Christopher Pelkey in April of 2017. She would meet him on Facebook. This is the same month that he had been sentenced for Alaimo's case, but he never told Smith about the charges against him. It would only be a few months later when the two would get engaged. Everything seemed to be pretty smooth sailing for the two until Pelkey began to get abusive with her physically, emotionally, and verbally after she became pregnant with their daughter. Even with the abuse, Smith would stay, and she would say in an interview that she loved him, and so she decided to stay. But this would be a terrible mistake. In the article down below, it would be the one that's AOL.com, another NBC affiliate. The violence would escalate to a fever pitch on March 17th of 2021. This is when Smith was reportedly on bed rest after having surgery, and Pelkey would choke her until she would urinate herself. In an interview with WABI5, Smith said, quote, "He came up and grabbed me by my hair and slammed me to the floor right on top of my surgery site and beat me until I was unconscious. He kicked me, hit me. Eventually he strangled me until I passed out." End quote. The judge in her divorce judgment noted that she fell from the bed, broke her pelvic bone, and damaged several ligaments that resulted in her having to go on disability. It would only be 2 days later when Pelkey would be arrested in an altercation with Smith's father over the abuse. Smith would be taken to the hospital after her attack, and they would say she had extensive damage and clear signs of strangulation. For this case of domestic violence, Pelkey would be charged with 4 felonies: aggravated assault, domestic violence terrorizing, and criminal threatening with a dangerous weapon. Pelkey even confessed to police that he had choked Smith while in an interview with them. So I am sure you are thinking he must really have to serve some time for this case. It's a horrible case. There is clear proof of abuse, and he even admitted to doing it. Well, if you're thinking that, you would be wrong. Pelkey would get to enter an Alford plea. If you do not know what an Alford plea is, it is a plea where you can plead guilty, but while doing so, you are still maintaining your innocence. I never really understood it. It's the same kind of plea that Susan Wright did when she murdered her husband. You see it a lot, but in this case, I was not expecting it. But what's most surprising to me is what the plea was on. It was on one misdemeanor count of domestic violence assault. He would be sentenced to 2 years of probation and a 6-month jail term, but he would really only spend around 10 days in jail. Smith was rightly so upset. She was terrified of this man. She had just had him charged with assault, and he was out walking around the streets again. How in the world could this happen is absolutely beyond me. The fact that he was able to get a misdemeanor anyway out of 4 felony charges after the woman had been sent to the hospital. She had torn ligaments. She had a broken pelvic bone. There was clear signs of strangulation. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So Kent Murdoch, one of the assistant district attorneys in the county, said that the felonies were dismissed because they could not prove them beyond a reasonable doubt. He wouldn't comment on anything or the incident any further than that. Well, Kent Murdoch, you can't tell me that this case, had it went to trial, that the jury wouldn't have found him guilty of what he had done, especially with what he did to Alaimo, if they knew about that as well. Why was there no real justice for these women, and why did the justice system feel comfortable letting this man walk the streets again? He seriously almost killed this poor woman, and all he gets is a misdemeanor. Give me a break. I don't get it. It only gets worse, guys. It only gets worse. Once again, it wouldn't take Christopher Pelkey long to find his next victim. It would only be a month after his arrest for Smith's case that he would meet Andrea Stevens, 38, on Facebook. This is something her and Smith had in common. They both had met him on Facebook. Like the previous 2 women, Pelkey seemed like a sweet and caring man at first, just like most abusers. But unlike his previous relationships, he was upfront about his past history and the allegations against him. He would just tell Smith that the 2 women had been working against him. I guess they were conspiring against him. They just wanted to get him in trouble for some reason. I don't know. That's what he told Stevens. Obviously, she didn't like the allegations, but she decided that she was going to give him the benefit of the doubt. She said she gives a lot of people the benefit of the doubt, so why not him? But in June of 2022, Pelkey was still going through with his divorce with Persis, and the judge in that case would pretty much let him have it. And of course, Smith would see this. It was, public news. The judge at the time, Eric Walker, noted how Pelkey had denied being an abuser and took an Alford plea. He stated, quote, "Plaintiff's denial of his own actions is disturbing, particularly given that the plaintiff is said to be engaging in a certified batterers program," end quote. So basically, in one of the previous cases, I think it was the Persis case, he was supposed to be going to a batterers program. They do have those for abusers, but I didn't find anything saying that he was, and so that is why the judge made that comment. The judge would also grant sole custody of the couple's daughter to Persis as well, and denied that Pelkey have any contact with her. When Smith would see this, she would be surprised, but she reportedly had already began suffering abuse from Pelkey, and she said that she could only imagine what the children had gone through because he also had another child. 6 months later, NBC notes that an arrest affidavit would say that Stevens had fled their trailer with her 4-year-old son after Pelkey allegedly assaulted the boy and would not let her see him. This would cause an argument which would apparently end in Pelkey choking Stevens until she couldn't breathe, rip out her hair, and threaten to rape and kill her and her son with a hammer. She told police that he tore her pants and thrown her to the floor while cursing at her. According to Stevens, this all happened because he had accused her of acting inappropriately with his teenage son. When police would arrive, Andrea Stevens would be running down the street, sobbing, while cradling her son, who had no shoes on. Officers noted that there was a hairless spot on her head and a mark on her neck. They even found the yellow hammer she had been threatened with. Pelkey would tell police that Stevens injured herself to frame him, but they wouldn't believe him. It didn't make sense. So in March of 2023, he would be indicted on 4 felony charges, including aggravated assaults and domestic violence assault. Sound familiar? This charge would revoke his probation in the Persis Smith case, which he would have to go to jail for, which is great. In this case, he would plead guilty to 1 count of aggravated assault and 1 count of domestic violence criminal threatening, which were both felonies. He would be sentenced to a suspended term of 4 years and 3 years of probation. But Pelkey could serve the suspended term if he violates his probation. The assault victim, Andrea Stevens, was unhappy with his sentencing, but she said she didn't necessarily want to have a trial either. There could have been an acquittal, he could have served less time, or there could have been a hung jury. There are just so many things and so many unpredictable factors to take into consideration when looking at a trial. Nobody can really blame Stevens for this fear with how little time Pelkey had served in his previous cases. Even with her case, his sentence just blows my mind. On the sentencing, Smith stated, quote, "He not only physically disabled me for life, but he has left a fear inside of me and all of his victims that no words can even express. Blood trauma and life-changing pain that has and is happening because of this is on the system." End quote. Alaimo agreed by saying, quote, "Don't know who the next woman is, but she's going to die and they're letting it happen." End quote. It just seems like the courts in this area just keep letting him get away with it. If it were up to me, he would be in prison the rest of his life. He continues to make the same actions and the same decisions and hurt whoever he is with. There are too many women involved now for it just to be some one-off thing or some kind of conspiracy like he was trying to say. While his parents may know him as a gentleman, that just isn't the case here. Christopher Pelkey is clearly not safe to be out in the public and to be dating. He has consistently hurt the people he has been with since 2015. I just don't see anything changing. Not to mention that he is only 37, 38 years old, which means he is pretty far away from the age that people typically age out of crime, and some people never do anyway. Our justice system just needs to do better. We put people away for years over theft and drug charges. Why is a domestic violence abuser who's almost killing people able to get their charges down to misdemeanors and minimal time? This man is a serial abuser, and like the women he had abused said, he will only end up killing someone. It is only a matter of time. The system just needs to do better. Smith has made it her mission to speak about what happened to her and to help other people with domestic violence. She is even helping with legislation. She said one idea would be to change how healthcare workers speak to potential victims when they come in, because when she had been in the hospital and they had asked her if she was safe at home, she could not reply to them saying no because she had Pelkey in the seat right next to her. He was right there. She has even gained a mass following on TikTok for sharing her story. She is using her experience and is just doing a wonderful job and doing wonderful advocacy work to help others like her, and I just cannot commend her enough for it. I will have the domestic violence hotline down below in the description box, as well as many other useful resources. I always have hotlines down there. Do not forget to check it out. If you or anyone you know needs help or needs to reach out to someone, don't be afraid to do it. If you're in a situation like this, I know it can be scary, but people around you will most likely want to help. And if they don't, reach out to me and I will see who we can get you into contact with to help you. My sister is a safe nurse and she sees cases like this way too much. Maybe we can get her on here to talk about them sometime. With that being said, that is all I have for you on the sad history of Christopher Pelkey. It's not sad for him, it's sad for the women that he abuses. I don't know how else to describe it. It's terrible. The man keeps getting away from it. I'm not even happy with his charges on the most recent case, to be honest. He'll be out pretty soon, I'm sure of it. Andrea, Persis, and Ashley, I stand by you, and and all of the other survivors of domestic violence. Please don't forget to hit that red subscribe button down below and turn on your post notifications so you do not miss any future content. If you have any case suggestions, please send them to killerconceptsvlog@gmail.com. You can also connect with me on social. All of the links are down below in the description box. Before you go, just remember that the world's most dangerous minds hide in the most unlikely places. Stay safe.